Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast. I'm Ollie Barrett, live from London, and these are the headlines. A UK court issues a formal order to extradite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the United States to face trial over the publication of secret files relating to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson will set off for India within hours, despite pressure at home to resign over lockdown-breaching gatherings. After nearly 2 months under siege, the southern city of Mariupol in Ukraine could fall into Russian hands as soon as today, as the two sides agree to a humanitarian corridor to allow civilians to flee. Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen brace for a televised debate with millions of voters still up for grabs, days before polls open in the presidential election runoff in France. Scientists at Europe's Physics Research Centre will this week fire up the 27-kilometre-long Large Hadron Collider after a shutdown for maintenance and upgrades was prolonged by COVID-19 delays. And the Kremlin says the expected ban of Russian tennis players from Wimbledon over Moscow's military campaign in Ukraine would be unacceptable. A British court has issued an order to extradite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the United States. He's wanted there for trial over the publication of secret files relating to the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The decision now rests with the Interior Minister of the UK, Priti Patel, although Assange's lawyers may still appeal to the High Court if she approves the extradition. The procedural step today in the long-running and high-profile legal battle was announced at a hearing in central London. It follows a decision in March to deny Australian-born Assange permission to appeal against his extradition. If the extradition order is indeed signed, Assange can try to challenge the decision by judicial review. The 50-year-old is wanted in the United States on 18 criminal charges, including breaking a spying law after WikiLeaks published thousands of secret US files back in 2010. He has been in a southeast London jail since 2019. Before that, he was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in the British capital for 7 years. He continues to deny any wrongdoing. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson will face a vote in the House of Commons on Thursday on whether he misled Parliament. Lawmakers will decide whether Boris Johnson should be referred for an investigation over his Partygate statements to parliamentarians previously. But he won't be there. He sets off for India later today. He's scheduled to attend events in the western state of Gujarat, followed by a diplomatic visit to New Delhi. The Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has granted a request from opposition MPs for a vote. The House will debate on Thursday whether Johnson misled Parliament when he previously said that COVID-19 lockdown rules weren't broken. On Tuesday, Boris Johnson offered an unreserved apology to the Parliament after paying a fine for breaching lockdown at a 2020 birthday celebration. It wasn't good enough for Labour leader Keir Starmer, though.
Let me begin in all humility by saying that on the 12th of April, I received a fixed penalty notice relating to an event in Downing Street on the 19th of June 2020. I paid the fine immediately and I offered the British people a full apology. And I take this opportunity on the first available sitting day to repeat my wholehearted apology to the House.
What a joke. Even now, as the latest mealy-mouthed apology stumbles out of one side of his mouth, a new set of deflections and distortions pour from the other. If the Prime Minister had any respect for John and the millions like him who sacrificed everything to follow the rules, he'd resign. But he won't, because he doesn't respect John. He doesn't respect the sacrifice of the British public. He is a man without shame.
The motion for Thursday is expected to ask MPs to decide whether to refer Boris Johnson to the Privileges Committee. Under parliamentary rules, UK government ministers are expected to resign for knowingly misleading Parliament and to correct the record as soon as possible. Last week, Boris Johnson became the first British Prime Minister to be sanctioned for breaking the law, along with his wife and the British Chancellor, Rishi Sunak. Only a few Conservative MPs are currently calling for the Prime Minister to resign, and so the Thursday vote is not expected to succeed for opposition parties, but he remains under huge pressure ahead of local, council and mayoral elections scheduled for May the 5th. When it comes to India, the Prime Minister will begin his trip with investment announcements in key industries in both the UK and India. He'll then move to New Delhi to meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday. That meeting will focus on India-UK strategic defence and diplomatic and economic partnerships. And our correspondent Chris Jones has sent us this report from London.
This is a trip that's been planned for a while, and the UK is facing many other issues as well as this Partygate scandal, including the recovery from COVID-19 and, of course, the energy crisis at the moment. And this trip to India is something that Boris Johnson is very keen on going ahead. He said that as we face threats to our peace and prosperity from autocratic states, it's vital that democracies and friends stick together. So he very much wants to go to India to talk about economic trade and how the two countries can come together. Now, there will, of course, be critics who say that he should stay in the UK and defend his cause. We, of course, heard those apologies on Tuesday, and the Labour Party was extremely critical of that. But nevertheless, the Prime Minister will probably travel to India to talk about economic ties there, and the debate will go ahead without him. So I think it will unlikely have an impact on the debate and the resulting vote. So we'll just really have to see how that one pans out.
Russia has once again issued an ultimatum to Ukrainian soldiers in Mariupol to lay down their arms and surrender. The proposal is likely again to be ignored.
Russia was intensifying its attack on Ukraine's east on Tuesday as it sought a decisive victory in Mariupol, prompting Western governments to pledge more arms and sanctions. Thousands of Russian troops backed by artillery and rocket barrages were advancing in what Ukrainian officials called the Battle of the Donbass. Russia bombarded the Azovstal steel plant, the main remaining stronghold in Mariupol, with bunker-buster bombs, a Ukrainian presidential advisor said late on Tuesday, after an ultimatum by Russia for Ukrainian troops to lay down their weapons had lapsed. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned Moscow for blocking any attempts to organize humanitarian corridors and save people.
The Russian army will forever inscribe itself in world history as perhaps the most barbaric and inhuman army in the world, deliberately killing civilians, destroying residential quarters and civilian infrastructure, and using all kinds of weapons, including those prohibited by international conventions, is already the brand signature of the Russian army.
The United States, Canada, Britain, France, and Germany on Tuesday pledged more support to Ukraine, including sending heavy artillery and ammunition. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby.
I would just say, without getting into what other nations are providing, that they have received additional platforms and parts to be able to increase their fleet size, their aircraft fleet size. I think I'd leave it at that.
In Mariupol, a humanitarian catastrophe has unfolded. Tens of thousands of residents have been trapped with no access to food or water, and bodies litter the streets. Ukraine believes more than 20,000 civilians have died there. Russia has denied targeting civilians in its invasion of Ukraine and says without evidence that signs of atrocities were staged. Video released by Ukraine's Azov battalion purported to show people living in the underground network beneath the steel plant, where they say hundreds of women, children, and elderly civilians are sheltering with diminishing supplies.
We lost our home. We lost our livelihood. We want to live a normal, peaceful life. We want to get out of here. There are lots of children in here. They're hungry. Get us out of here, we beg you. We've already cried out all the tears we have. We can't cry anymore.
Reuters could not independently verify where or when the video was shot. Shells and rockets also hit Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, officials said, wrecking apartment blocks and other buildings. Officials said 4 people were killed and 14 wounded. Reuters journalists saw the bodies of 3 people, apparently killed by shrapnel, lying on the pavement.
Finance ministers and business leaders from the world's richest countries will meet today in Washington, D.C. They'll address a host of global challenges, from rising debt to a looming food crisis. The war in Ukraine is likely to dominate the first meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. According to senior U.S. officials, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will boycott some sessions if Russian officials are present. Other countries are expected to follow that stance. The Treasury Secretary Yellen will, however, attend the opening session to show support for the Ukrainian finance minister who's flying in from Kiev. Russian finance ministry officials are expected to participate in the event remotely. France has signalled it will participate in the boycott. German officials say Berlin will not, insisting instead it will send strong messages during and after the meetings. Many of the participating countries have condemned Russia over Ukraine. China and India have not. Several other wealthy nations, including much of Europe, however, depend heavily on Russian energy.
Venez dans mes bras. C'est violent, c'est inceste. Le soir revenir dans l'Europe. Personne jamais ne relève leur incohérence.
Just 4 days now until France's final presidential runoff. Senior political allies are warning the incumbent President Emmanuel Macron is not certain to win, despite polls indicating that his lead over his far-right challenger Marine Le Pen may be widening. French Prime Minister Jean Castex has asserted it's too early to claim victory. Castex's immediate predecessor Edouard Philippe also said that nothing should be taken for granted, hinting at a possible low turnout during Sunday's presidential runoff. Macron and Le Pen will face off in a televised debate later today.
Nous, on est de la communauté malgache, mais on vote pour Macron. On est avec vous.
Next to Greece, known for its ancient ruins, its whitewashed villages, its sunny beaches. But tourism has faced significant restrictions because of the pandemic, like much of the rest of the world. And the industry in Greece is now hoping for a bumper summer season this year.
The summer tourism season in Greece is all set to begin. Soon after Orthodox Easter on April 24th, the island nation expects more visitors and a revenue hike. And that's why COVID restrictions are now lifted. Masks are no longer required indoors. COVID vaccination certificates in restaurants and open public areas are no longer mandatory. In fact, officials are also considering lifting another important mandate, that of presenting an EU digital COVID certificate to enter the country.
We decided to go to Greece because we went to Greece before the corona crisis and we had lovely memories, and we just thought about coming back to Greece as a start post-corona and post the crisis. And it's a great feeling to be back.
The decision to ease the restrictions is based on the epidemiological data and expert recommendations. This according to Greece's health ministry. Measures will now be evaluated in September. COVID infections have drastically reduced in the Mediterranean island. 72% of its 11 million population are now fully vaccinated. Tourism has a significant impact on Greece's economy. The industry provides employment to roughly 759,000 people. Greek tourism's contribution to the country's GDP was around 38 million euros. This was prior to the pandemic. In 2020, the numbers fell rapidly. As countries across the world impose lockdowns and travel restrictions, currently the war in Ukraine has also caused global price rise. But local businesses hope that this season will bring them some respite.
We hope the season will be better than last year. We started off with very good indications, but because of the war and rising prices, it has stalled a bit now.
With about 33 million visitors, Greece set a record in 2019. It became one of the most visited countries in the world. Today, Greece hopes to earn at least 80% of revenues it raked in 2019. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Netflix's bad year has just got worse. After shares tanked earlier in the year, the streaming leader has lost subscribers according to its first quarter earnings. Netflix shed 200,000 of them in just 3 months in 2022.
Netflix reported losing subscribers for the first time in over a decade on Tuesday and said it's considering offering a lower-priced service plan supported by ads to combat its lagging growth. Citing rising inflation, its suspension of service in Russia, and fierce competition from other streaming services, Netflix said it lost 200,000 subscribers in the first quarter, a sharp reverse in fortune for a company that thrived throughout the global health crisis. And despite the return of highly anticipated series such as Stranger Things and Ozark, the company further forecast it would lose 2 million subscribers in the second quarter, sending its stock tumbling more than 20% in after-hours trading on Tuesday. CEO Reed Hastings has long dismissed the idea of offering an ad-supported service option at a lower price point. But he confirmed in an interview with investors Tuesday that his thinking had changed, citing the success of similar offerings from rivals like HBO Max and Disney+. Netflix's gloomy predictions come as competitors like HBO Max and Apple TV churn out high-quality content, intensifying the so-called streaming wars. Netflix is also planning to clamp down on account sharing, practiced by nearly 100 million households around the world. And as growth slows in mature markets like the U.S., the company is increasingly focused on other parts of the world and investing in local language content. But streaming shows isn't the only form of entertainment competing for consumers' time. In Deloitte's latest digital media trends survey, the majority of Gen Z and millennial consumers polled said they spend more time on TikTok and YouTube than streaming services.
Moving on now to the high-profile Hollywood defamation case. Johnny Depp has testified in court in Virginia, claiming that he has never struck his ex-wife Amber Heard.
Nothing of the kind had ever happened.
Actor Johnny Depp took the witness stand on Tuesday in his defamation case against ex-wife Amber Heard, calling her claims that he physically abused her, quote, heinous and disturbing.
But never did I myself reach the point of striking Miss Heard in any way, nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
Depp, speaking softly and slowly for nearly 3 hours, said in a Virginia courtroom that it was a complete shock when Heard accused him 6 years ago of becoming violent during their relationship. He said it was important to set the record straight, not just for himself, but also his 2 children from a previous relationship who were in high school at the time.
I felt it my responsibility to stand up not only for myself in that instance, but stand up for my children. It's very strange when one day you're Cinderella, so to speak, and then in 0.6 seconds you're Quasimodo.
Depp is suing Heard for $50 million, alleging she defamed him when she wrote a December 2018 opinion piece in the Washington Post about being a survivor of domestic abuse. Attorneys for Heard have argued that she told the truth and that her opinion was protected as free speech under the First Amendment. Depp admitted to taking drugs, which included an opiates addiction he said he has kicked, but claimed Tuesday that Heard, quote, grossly embellished his substance abuse. Heard watched his testimony with little expression, occasionally jotting notes. Less than 2 years ago, Depp lost a libel case against The Sun, a British tabloid that labeled him a wife-beater. A London High Court judge ruled he had repeatedly assaulted Heard and put her in fear for her life.
Byzantine music is a 2,000-year-old tradition that Cypriots are determined to keep alive. We'll leave you with that story. Thanks as ever for watching. See you again, same time tomorrow.
From the middle of the Vespers until the end, the lights are shut down and a slow hymn is sung. And this is followed by a solo part that is different in every afternoon mass. This has a very high theological meaning as it prepares us for the passion and resurrection of Christ.
As things slowly return to normal, chanters have made a comeback to the churches for the traditional Byzantine chants. A 2,000-year-old tradition originating from the Byzantine Empire. In 2019, the United Nations Educational and Scientific Cultural Organization added Byzantine music to its list of intangible cultural heritage, describing it as living art. And celebrations this Orthodox Easter saw young members of the Cypriots melodious Byzantine choir chant these monophonic verses from the new system of chants that was introduced in the year 1814.
This manuscript is from the 14th century and it belongs to the Cathedral of St. John the Theologian, known as Bibi from the Arabic word Habibi. And it shows clearly the history of the Byzantine music. And not only this manuscript, but the other ones we have here also have that date from the beginning of the times of the writing of the music notes until our days.
While families prayed and the choir chanted these traditional hymns, there were also those who rung in the Holy Week with a modern twist by playing electronic version of the Byzantine music.
This is right, Arab.
On today's edition of WION